Afternoon, everybody.
Okay.
We have been away for about a month. Um, you last were with us or the week, or was it a week or a few days before DragonCon? Um, well, our last podcast that we did was before we went off to DragonCon. Um, we went to Atlanta for 5, 6 days. Um, and it was our second time there. And each time I I understand more and more why they call it Hot Lanta, because it one of my friends who used to live there when her husband was in the military called it the sweaty butthole of the country, and I fully understand why. Um, as you know, I am Crash, also known as the Odd Crapple.
I'm Lanky.
Yeah, he is.
There.
um, Today is just gonna kind of be relaxed. We're gonna do a kind of a fun recap of DragonCon, some of the things we saw, some of the things we liked. Um, just a rehash of everything, because I think, at least for us personally, with a lot of the projects that we're doing, I feel like we got a lot out of this year because I think we had a different focus. Um, and as Lanky would probably agree, I think we were more comfortable in that setting, as far as being aware of what to expect. Um, I think it was still, for me personally, I think it was still just as chaotic, um, because you never know how a mass amount of people are going to behave. Um, you have individual behaviors within a group, and all of those individual behaviors become one, and it is the true definition of chaos. Um, Overall, though, it was another successful, good experience, I would say.
Hmm.
Um, but so I think it was, what were the dates that DragonCon happened this year? Because I think it was
I think it's
the
like the 29th through the 3rd.
was it? Yeah, something like that. Um, the thing that I still don't like is it starts on a Thursday. Well, calendar wise, it starts on a Thursday, and it goes for 5 days. Problem I have is, um, what they don't tell you until you're really there is that the festivities of all of it don't really start until that Friday. So I think that, other than getting your badges and making sure that you're settled in your hotels, I think that it's foolish to have the convention stated on the website as starting on a Thursday, but not have anything for anybody to do until Friday, because you go around and you're kind of walking around like a mindless zombie with anywhere from 80 to 100,000 or 120,000 people. And I think, I don't even know if they gave the number of attendees this year. I think last year was something like 80 or 90,000. I don't know if we ever found out what the tally was this year.
I
Um,
I heard over a conversation it was 90,000 pre-registered. Uh, so I don't know who else came, but there was at least that many this
yeah,
year.
yeah. Um, if anybody who's watching this right now probably saw the cover image for this episode, which Lanky, I know you didn't, or you aren't aware of this. I created one just before we went live,
Oh,
and put it up. Anybody who's watching this sees that we're doing a DragonCon recap, along with health and wellness. Yes, the two do go hand in hand, and you'll see why in a few minutes. Um,
stay tuned for the segue.
yeah. Um, but I felt like, being that we've been away for a month, that we needed to kind of um, fill people in on what we're doing. I know before DragonCon, we briefly touched on some of the creative projects that we're doing, but I think we need to go more in depth into those, um, because it's getting to a point where I feel like we're going to need um, support from our viewer community, our listener community, um, because being in the Comic Con community, you see the camaraderie and the willingness to help each other, and it's something that you don't witness in everyday life, and it blows me away. And as far as the health and wellness from a mental and emotional standpoint, I think that, and I mean, obviously I can't speak for everybody, but I think that as far as mental and emotional health, it's probably one of the healthiest places to be. Obviously, I can't talk today, um, just because I don't think, individually or collectively, we've ever been to a convention where we've experienced, you know, angry people or people that have a bad attitude. Um, it just feels comfortable. And I think that, especially in, an environment that is that oversaturated with people, I think that I think comfort is something that you need,
Mm.
because trying to get to everything that DragonCon offers, you're never going to get to everything in the course of 5 days, because they offer so much. And Lanky, I don't know if I actually told you this. I read probably about a week ago that one of the hotels, and actually you might be able to look this up to verify which hotel.
Uh,
One of the hotels um, that is used for DragonCon actually just got bought and is getting a complete renovation. So that'll be interesting, for next year. Um, and it was strange because I actually heard it on the I read it on the group on Facebook for DragonCon official, and they were saying that this particular hotel already got a facelift, um I think 2 years ago, and it just seemed weird to me hearing or reading that they would kind of redo the entire thing again. It seems like a waste of money, because I think overall each hotel we went into, they must tend to it so well that none of it looks used. Like, you can't see any deterioration or dilapidation or you know wear and tear. Like, it doesn't exist in those hotels. um I think the only one that I didn't really get a great vibe from, uh the only one I didn't really get a great vibe from, maybe because of the lighting, because it seemed like a darker hotel, was the Westin.
mm.
um their lighting in there just seemed. I mean, it's like if you go into an intimate restaurant, like the lighting is low and the atmosphere is low. So maybe that was what they were striving for. But it's like when you have something like a Comic Con, you want high energy, a lot of, you know, interaction with people and just, kind of everything catches your eye. Whereas with the Westin, it just seemed like it almost seemed like a stuffy hotel because it seemed like people that were high end that wanted to get away from the public would go. So I don't know if the Westin would be my favorite part of it. Um, but overall, I think that, the environment that DragonCon creates in the places that they inhabit for that time, I think that it kind of brings a different sort of life to those areas.
Yeah, actually, I just found yeah, the Hyatt Hotels Corp sold the 1,260 room Hyatt Regency Atlanta to an unnamed buyer for $355 million. As part of the sale, the new owner plans to invest significant capital into the hotel of over the next several years. Um, yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, the Hyatt was one of my favorites.
Hmm.
Kind of centrally located. It kind of begins the adventure into the, Dragon Con. As you step into the Hyatt, it is very well lit. It's almost organized like a very tall courtyard. Um, so there's like skylights at the very top, shining down. Uh, Artistic sculptures. Um, the coloring is usually, kind of bright, like maybe sandstone. Whereas, yeah, you mentioned, the Westin being a little dark. A lot of wood and gray aesthetic. So I think it looks a little bit more fancy, for lack of a better term. But I mean, for what it's worth, I enjoyed exploring all the hotels.
Yeah.
Uh, so
I think for me, the thing that confused me was um, I would get the Hyatt and the Marriott confused because you have the what I call the caterpillars, but they're the footbridges between the hotels. Um, you forget because there are footbridges connecting several hotels. You kind of forget what hotel you're going into
mm,
because they're all interconnected. Except for the Westin. The Westin was the only one that was not connected to, um, or was the Westin connected? I don't
no,
know.
the Westin wasn't, and neither was the Sheraton.
Oh, you're right. I thought that there was only one hotel that wasn't connected, but you're right. Um, but yeah, it was always for me anyway. It was always confusing as to whether we were in the Hyatt or the Marriott. Both beautiful hotels, but I think that at least internally, they looked similar enough to me that it confused me. So I never knew which hotel I was in.
Well, the thing is, with so many people, the Hyatt, when you walk in, it can look very small
Yeah,
compared to others. I mean, if it were any other day and you walked into the atrium, it would look huge. But
yeah.
with, I don't know, no fewer than 500 people at any one time, in front of the in that lobby area, um, yeah, it looks pretty claustrophobic.
Yeah.
And yeah, the footbridges in kind of the back left takes you right to the Marriott, and the Marriott has several floors and kind of a wider a wider space that you can walk in,
Hmm.
where a lot of people showcase their larger uh, costumes. So
Yeah. Um, Do you remember, and this is probably, irrelevant, but overall, do you remember what hotel it was that everybody kind of congregated and there was like, I guess, constantly a DJ, where people, like all the cosplayers would go and congregate on the main floor of the one hotel where there was a DJ and it was just a constant party.
Yeah, the Hilton.
Was it the Hilton?
Yeah,
Okay.
that place
Um,
was hopping.
what's that?
That place was hopping.
Yeah, I was the only thing there that wasn't hopping. Um, but I think as far as our main topic of health and wellness, um, go into if you would go into at least your thought process as far as planning for being in an environment with a different atmosphere or an like temperature wise, different allergens, as well as being in an environment with so many people, and also your thoughts on um, having to do a convention like that on a budget, because I think that our eating habits were, you know, connected to kind of a health and wellness sort of spin as well. So I want to hear your perspective as to, what your thoughts were as far as health and wellness going into it and, kind of during and after.
Yeah, because you have a couple different factors, kind of all converging all at once. So you're in a foreign place, a very hot place, uh, during that transition between summer and fall. So you've got probably a little bit more bacteria growing because of the heat,
Hmm.
allergens coming into play, and then with 90,000 plus people, you really can't escape germs very easily.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, the hotels did have hand sanitizer almost at like every entrance.
Yeah.
So we took advantage of that. Uh, but I know prior to the con, we took our vitamins.
Yeah.
Uh, but
Well, just to clarify, we took vitamin C each morning, or at least
yeah,
you did. I don't know if I did every morning. I know I did a few times, but I don't think I did every morning. But we didn't take like a multivitamin. We took vitamin C. So
true.
I want to make that clear.
Although there's always some doubt that it actually boosts immunity, so it
I
might
mean,
not have helped as much as we would have liked. But
well, I mean, I think it's helped you the past two times we've gone. Um, I maybe my experience after the con was due to the fact that I didn't take it the whole time. So,
mm, but yeah, as far as our diet, I mean, for my part, I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of nutrition over the course of 4 or 5 days. Um, it again on a budget, so there's you know free food at the con suite, and which is great for everyone, especially for anyone on a budget.
yeah.
Uh, so yeah, we definitely took advantage of that. Um, but yeah, all in all, with the 90,000 people, uh, I'm assuming not everyone washes their hands after going to the bathroom or that sort of thing. So germs can spread pretty easily. And there is the curse of conventions called con crud,
Mm.
where people just get a cold after they come home from a convention, and I don't think we felt it too harshly. My nose did start stinging a little bit on the final day, but it was manageable. It didn't last too long, and once I got home, kind of back to my normal routine, I didn't really feel anything. So
Um, like I mean, I know that I know your social habits are relatively different from mine. Like, um, I tend to be more willing to approach people just randomly. Um, did you, when you approached anybody and talked to them, because I know, especially in the Walk of Fame, you did. But when you approached anybody and talked to them, were there things that you did or didn't do as far as, you know, from a like a health perspective or a hygiene perspective? Like I know that especially there, um, I tried to refrain. I say tried because I wasn't really successful most of the time. I tried to refrain from shaking hands because my thing is with pushing my chair, I don't know what kind of germs my wheels are going to pick up from the surfaces that I'm wheeling over. So I try to refrain from shaking hands. I'll do, the occasional fist bump, which I know people see as kind of douchebag like, but it's for me, it's just like I don't want to pass on any potential germs to somebody. Um, but especially with the amount of people that you tend to interact with at a convention, how do you go about, being, you know, physical, so to speak, as far as physical interaction?
Mm. Well, I did shake hands.
Mhm,
And I guess that's kind of the, social norm that just kind of pervaded my own psyche.
mhm,
Um, but also the OCD in me would always, sanitize my hand, especially before eating, anything like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, for the Walk of Fame, I shook hands with whatever actor, actress, I came across, and just shout out to Steve Whitmire, awesome dude, one of my favorite puppeteers. He was there, and oh
For
my
anybody who doesn't know him,
god.
you might have to describe him as just more of a puppeteer, like,
Oh yeah, okay. So I probably a Muppet performer.
okay,
But he does the voice and performance of Rizzo the Rat, Bean Bunny, Wembley Fraggle, that ilk. And he worked with Jim Henson, starting off, and he was just so cool.
yeah,
I felt like he was. I don't know. You tend to think of celebrities as like being on this pedestal or high above you, that sort of thing. But he
mhm,
was just so down to earth and realistic and authentic and that sort of thing. And uh, yeah, so I was glad to have met him. He
yeah.
was probably the highlight of my own personal experience.
And
Yes.
as far as meeting the celebrities, the one thing that just kind of popped into my head from recollection of being in the Walk of Fame, um, the celebrities are always shaking hands and hugging people. And what surprised me is very few, if any of them, had hand sanitizer at their table. And so it makes me wonder, you know, how conscious of their health they have to be because you figure they probably go to 60 or 70 shows in a year and they're 3 4 5 days long. It's like I wonder how aware, I mean they've got to be aware of it, but I wonder how you know actively conscious they are of I'm shaking somebody's hand that I've never seen before and I don't know where they just were. It's like it's kind of the whole thing of when we were back in school, like, oh, I'm not gonna touch your hand because I don't know where it's been, kind of thing. Um, that always pops into my head. So if you, I don't know if you consider yourself a germaphobe or not. or any level of one. But if you were a celebrity that was well known and you were at an appearance like that, is that something that you would take into consideration, like having hand sanitizer or some type of barrier between you and any germs that are around you?
I mean, I wouldn't go overboard. I mean, hypothetically, I mean, a panel only lasts less than 90 minutes.
Mhm.
So, and I know for larger, big celebrities, they get the auditoriums to, speak with their fans and that sort of thing. Um,
Well, and it's not even the panels, because the panels, they don't tend to physically interact. I'm talking about, like, the Walk of Fame, where if you're sitting at a table, you're obviously gonna be shaking probably, and especially with DragonCon, probably 10,000 people at least.
yeah. I mean, for what it's worth, I take precautions because I know they're not there like all day
Right.
at the Walk of Fame. I think they're there like an hour and then a
Well
break, and then
well, they're there. I would say they are at the Walk of Fame most of the day, and they break for either lunch or when they have a panel to go to. So I think the only breaks they get from the Walk of Fame are the panels, the photo ops, the professional photo ops, and a lunch break maybe.
all right. Then I mean, then I treat it just like any other work protocol.
Mhm.
You wash your hands before you eat, after going to the bathroom, that sort of thing. Because I mean, there are steps you can take to protect yourself. Um, I mean, a lot of germs are, maybe airborne, some definitely on surfaces. Uh, so again, I think washing your hands is really the probably the best way to protect yourself.
Yeah.
Um, but I know no one can escape, everything 100% of the time. So I mean, yeah, I'm sure they've built up an immunity at the very least, but I think they also know what to expect. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think if they've done it before, then they know to take advantage of hand sanitizer, of washing your hands at the sinks in the bathroom or something. Um, but yeah, I mean,
It
not
almost
nothing too.
it almost makes you wanna ask them, their health regimen before they come into an environment like that, because they are in that type of environment several times in a week or in a month.
Yeah, it, it's never crossed my mind to ask, but maybe one of these days.
Next year you will.
Well, I still have to get my funds together. I'm not
Oh,
sure.
we'll figure it out, because by next year, you and I will have a comic book that will be, you know, publicly known, and we will probably end up at a few conventions as exhibitors. So just be ready for that,
Oh,
because it's gonna happen.
sweet deal. That makes
Um,
things a little easier. So,
yeah. Um, Now, one of the things that I'm sure that you haven't thought about since the convention, because it wasn't really a concern while we were there, um, when you have a germ pop up that you are unaware of, well, not necessarily unaware of, but you don't necessarily have control over how that germ manifests or spreads. Um, I'm curious to know what your, like, if you had any thoughts in your head when they announced the prior to the convention, a couple weeks prior, the issue with the one hotel that had Legionnaires.
yeah.
And I could tell by your face that you knew where I was going with that statement before I said it.
For what it's worth, luckily they had that issue taken care of weeks before the con. But yeah, when I heard about it, like beginning of summer or somewhere around
Yeah,
there.
it was. It was. I think it was. I think it was the beginning of July, maybe just after July 4th. I heard about it. I think.
Yeah. It did raise some concern.
Yeah,
Uh,
because
but
I had always heard about it, but I don't even know what it is. If you have the ability, do you have the ability to look it up like on Wikipedia? Because I'm sure that um, there are probably people out there that don't even know that it exists. I've heard about it, growing up, but I never really knew what it was. I know it's waterborne.
yeah. So it. Oh yeah. Okay. So here's the rundown. Basic
Hmm.
definition.
Hmm.
So Legionnaires' disease, also known as legionellosis, is a form of atypical pneumonia caused by any type of Legionella bacteria. Signs and symptoms include cough, shortness of breath, high fever, muscle pains, and headaches. Um, so I believe it started. Um, so, like in pools of water, bacteria can collect and that sort of thing. In modern day buildings with like AC units and that sort of thing, when water collects, gathers bacteria, and when people run, the air systems, the heating, cooling, whatever in the air ducts, it can very easily spread that bacteria around the building. So there was fear that that would kind of just ruin everyone's day
Yeah.
at the con, but luckily they sanitized, cleaned up the issue way beforehand. But yeah, it again, bacteria. Uh, I would say in enclosed spaces like this convention,
Hmm.
take some time to get outside and get some fresh air for a bit. It's gonna be hot and sweltering, but it'll help give you a break from any stuffy air or anything circulating in the air that shouldn't. Uh, yeah. So I don't know. I guess just be aware. Wash your hands. Um, and it's hard to say. If you catch something, see your doctor. That
Yeah.
I think that's the gist.
Um, One other thing, and then if there's anything you can think of, I'll let you take the reins. But one other thing that I didn't really have an issue with at DragonCon, but earlier in August I had an issue with um, at a local convention here in my town called Big Lit Comic Con. What do you have any opinion as to an age restriction of people that can come to a convention? Because based on my experiences individually with conventions I've gone to, I've always found it problematic when parents bring their kids, and when I say kids, I mean under the age of 10, who are unpredictable and tend to be very um, unruly, and they
Hmm.
don't they're extremely disobedient. Um,
Yeah.
I had some issues with anxiety at Biglet Comic Con because of these kids that were just running wild. They were just running buck wild around the convention hall, and the parents would, calmly tell them to stop, but there was no gruff in their voice, because when you're trying
Mm.
to stop a child from doing something that they shouldn't be doing, you need to have a little gruff in your voice to get them to stop dead in their tracks and actually listen to you. But they were doing it more like a Susie Homemaker or a June Cleaver. And it's like that type of approach is not going to get them to listen. But that aside, I'm curious what your thoughts are, because kids seem to pick up germs from various things, and I won't, gross anybody out listening or watching. But kids tend to pick up germs from the most ridiculous places. So, do you think, in your opinion, do you think that there should be an age restriction as to how old you have to be able to attend, especially a convention like DragonCon, where you potentially have upwards of probably 5,000 young kids. Any one of them could have a germ that they could, spread and not really know it. So is it the responsibility of the parents to say, I think my kid's still a little too young to go to this?
I mean, for my part, it all depends. Oddly enough, not for reasons of health. I mean, I know, kids are kids. They're usually vectors of disease and in
They're
some fashion.
sponges.
So, um, I know for my primary concern is for, let's see, the sizes of a con and what type of convention it is. For a place like DragonCon, where there are like literally tens of thousands of people, it actually might behoove the parents to leave the kids at home just because they can be easily lost.
Oh
For when
yeah.
you're in a big capital city and 90,000 people in costumes, some costumes actually being like 10 feet tall, wide costumes, that sort of thing, you can get lost in the crowd very easily.
Hmm.
Um, so I think just for the parents' sanity, maybe wait till the kids are, tall enough,
Yeah.
uh, and also old enough to appreciate that. Oh wow, these people are in amazing costumes, the culture, that sort of thing.
And
Um,
you bring up a good point, and I'll let you finish in a minute, but I have to say this just before I forget it because you know my memory. Um, you and I both come from the theme park environment. Like that's where we met. Um, One of the things that I always say to my mom is um, because back in '93, I was 8 years old. And I know that after school got out, we ended up going uh, on a vacation to Disney World. Now, obviously, in the short term, I was able to, vividly remember things that happened in that vacation. As I've gotten older, because now being 34, um, I have had to rely on pictures instead of organic memory.
mm,
And I have to wonder, should parents wait to bring their kids to, say, Disney World or a Comic Con, anything like that, until they're able to actually, you know, enjoy it? Like I think kids enjoy it because it's an ADD thing. Like there's so much to see, but I don't think they actually organically enjoy it because, like I said, I don't organically remember anything from that experience. Just what I see in pictures.
because
So,
that's a tough
in the
call.
context in the context of Comic Con, just to stay on track, do you think that parents should wait until kids are like maybe over the age of 10, where they actually have the ability to recall memories?
Uh, I would say ideally yes, but I know parents take advantage of the children under 3 come in free.
Yeah.
So if you want to do like a family trip, then it's a nice way to do it just for paying for 2 adults, say.
Yeah.
Like you got your parents and maybe 1 or 2 kids that are under 3, and you're like, oh, let's take advantage of that. We'll take pictures and that
Mhm,
sort of thing. But then when infantile amnesia kicks in, the kids don't remember anything.
mhm.
So, whatever.
And
I think economically it's a solution, but
yeah, and not to get too much off track, but do you remember the movie Baby Geniuses?
I never saw that.
Okay. So the premise is it's a bunch of babies. It's understanding babies from their perspective. Like the noises that they make, this movie kind of makes you believe that the noises that they make are actually their, starting language that they use with each other. So babies understand each other. But what the movie did was the movie translated the noises that they make into words. Obviously, for the movie, they were voiceovers. But when you talk about infantile amnesia, it brought up that movie because they a baby gets to a certain age where the movie described it as crossing over into being cognizant of your or surroundings and being able to express differently. Um, so I have to wonder if there's the baby way of interacting, there's the you know infant slash child way of interacting, but I wonder as far as memory recall if that has any um if there's anything as far as memory recall when it comes to certain ages, because I know in the movie, once a baby had crossed over, and I know you can't see my, there we go.
Uh,
Yeah. Once a baby had crossed over and started to be able to verbally interact with people who could speak verbally like you and I, they didn't remember the language they spoke as an infant.
huh.
So it like I said, it might be a complete veering off the path of what we were talking about, but um, I think it goes to the larger concept of, you know, and I know we're not scientists, but when can you have memory recall? Like when does your memory recall kick in without assistance from other people?
Uh, well, again, the brain is in development up until age, well, like 25 or something like that.
I guess a better way to frame it is what if you had to explain it from your point of view, what is your earliest memory that you have?
Uh, actually, I might have to ask my parents about that because I didn't really have.
I'm talking about memories that you have, earliest memories you have without being helped.
So yeah, here's the thing. Like, I remember, oddly enough, I actually remember my mom holding me and singing that lullaby, a Mockingbird or something like that, uh, at night.
Oh, yeah, I don't know what it's actually called, but it's like, oh, it's Hush Little Baby.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember that at night with like the night light on the wall shining too brightly, like right in my eyes, and I'm like, "Oh, this is nice, but the light's really bright."
Yeah.
But I don't know what age that was. Um, I also remember seeing my baby brother in the hospital, and actually my dad propped me up on his knee. So I was standing on his knee to see over the brick wall into the window of the nursery. Um, and I just remember being really uncomfortable and bored just seeing all these babies in a nursery.
Yeah.
Again, I didn't appreciate it for what it was at the time. Uh, but I remember that bit, and that was when I was 2.5.
Hmm.
Because I know my brother and I are 2.5 years apart.
Right.
But other than that, there are a couple other things, but the chronology is off. So I don't know what actually is my earliest memory and just memory out of convenience.
And actually, you just said something that made absolute sense. You couldn't appreciate what you were experiencing, and I think that more than the memory of it, because I think once you're able to have memory recall, I think that you can start to appreciate the experiences you have.
Hmm.
um So I wonder, especially with kids being so young and like literally everything catching their attention, I wonder if they can appreciate being at an event like a Comic-Con or at a theme park.
Well, I think the rule of thumb, I guess, probably around 7 or 8, you can start recalling things more readily. And I was told, we got a remote control car once, I think for my birthday or something when I was 7 or 8,
Mhm.
and someone telling, "Oh, well, at least he's old enough now to appreciate it," and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I could, that makes sense."
Yeah,
Um, or I could appreciate, memories and that sort of thing. And that's when it really kind of hit me that I'm like, huh, there may come a time when I forget a lot of my past. Especially the older you get, there's a lot of time and a
yeah,
lot of stuff happening in
and
that lifespan.
along the lines of your relatives saying, "Oh, he's old enough to appreciate it now." Um, I remember I'm there are cousins that I have that are older than me, but there are cousins that I have that I'm also older than.
Hmm.
With the cousins that I have that I'm older than, I remember having the discussion with my mom a lot, watching how they interacted or watching how they behaved during Christmas or a birthday when they were younger. And I remember having the discussion with my mom of why are they not appreciating the things that they're getting? Because a week after they get them, these things would be broken or lost or just completely obliterated. And it's like
Hmm.
I don't, and especially nowadays where you have 2 and 3 year olds getting tablets. Like mom and I just watched America's Funniest Videos over the weekend, and um, there was a video that they sent in, or was it on? I think it was America's Funniest. Um, there was a video that somebody sent in, and this baby, probably 2 or 3, um, had taken Desitin, the diaper rash cream, and just and it wasn't in the squeeze tube like we were used to when we were a kid. It was in a tub, like a tub, and the baby had taken the Desitin and covered himself, the couch, the table, everything on the couch, everything on the table, and all of a sudden the parent is videotaping this instead of disciplining the child. I mean, I know it's hard to discipline a 2 or 3 year old, but the one thing the child picked up was a tablet. Why would you give a child a tablet?
Uh, I don't know. I guess laziness. I don't know.
But
Uh,
it's like when they used to say when we were growing up that parents would use the TV as a babysitter.
hmm.
So they would stay. I mean, my mom never did this to me, but I know friends of mine that are my age that their parents used to put a TV show on for them to distract them. And it's just like, you know, kind of that whole concept of out of sight, out of mind. Like kids should be seen, not heard, or something like that. I don't know. But, going trying to get back on track, I don't see where it's logical to bring a child to a Comic-Con, especially when germs are so attracted to them because their immune system is still building. So they're
Hmm.
more susceptible to catching a germ that their immune system is not familiar with. So if they are a germ sponge, it puts everybody else in the vicinity at risk.
Yeah. For my part, I would say for smaller conventions, as long as it's child appropriate, don't bring your kids to a furry convention or anything. But as long
You
as
know what? If I ever have kids, I'm bringing them to Walker Stalker Con, the Walking Dead convention that's down in Atlanta.
oh, cool. Oh yeah.
just to get them scared at an early age, so that things when they're older don't bother them.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, we have a Renaissance festival, maybe maybe 20 miles away or so.
Yeah,
Uh, but I think that'd be perfect for kids, and adults. You see kind of this, I don't know, like this type of fantasy maker culture that just converges, and it's fun for everybody. Um, so those type of conventions and festivals and that sort of thing, I'd be like, yeah, bring the kids. They're not too overpopulated or anything. Um, but yeah, for some of these big conventions, like DragonCon, just for peace of mind, I maybe leave the kids at home until they're, I don't know, 10, 11 or something like that,
yeah.
where they're tall enough that they can see over, at least see where they are.
Be careful, because a lot of kids can see over things I can't. So be careful how you phrase that.
Right. But yeah, as long as they're old enough to appreciate it, and be able to take care of themselves, uh, yeah, I think they should be good at a larger convention.
Now, I know we're anybody who watches this back is probably going to shit on us for this, because we're neither of us are parents. But if you are an avid convention goer, but you have kids, if do you think what is your opinion of if you can't find a babysitter to just bring the kids with you, even if the kids completely act out in that envir- environment? Should you? I mean, I know that going to the convention is rather pricey, but if you can't find a sitter for your kids, should you just call it a day and forego that convention instead of bringing your kids into that environment if you know that they're not going to behave?
Hmm. For my part, I would have to, lay the groundwork that you have to behave if you want to go to this convention. And then if you don't, we're
Easier
not
said
going
than
next
done.
year.
Easier said than done, though, because once the kids get there and they get overstimulated by everything they see, all bets are off. And I had that experience with my friend Krista, who you know. Um, when I went down to Florida to see her, I brought her to two conventions back to back, one weekend and one the next weekend. And her kids were not old enough to appreciate where they were. So they were complete jackasses the entire time. And she had never been to a convention before. So, as a first impression, she really wasn't having a good time at a convention because her kids were being dicks. But she didn't have the ability to get a babysitter. Um,
Mm.
for reasons that I won't bring up, but um, it's a thing of, if you have to base it on how your kids are at home, how they listen to you at home. Because if they don't listen to you at home, they're not going to listen to you in an 11-story building with you know potentially 100,000 people.
Yeah. I'd say, case by case basis. Again, but if you have good kids, they take direction well, they know how to behave, especially in larger groups of people.
Yeah.
Then you probably should be fine. If they are a little rambunctious and are likely to run off or have temper tantrums or that sort of thing, then you might have to suck it up as a parent and forego this year and maybe wait till next year for them to mature a little bit, learn a little more how to behave and that sort of thing.
Or plan a babysitter ahead of time.
Yeah, if you can find one that fits your budget, yeah. Yeah, it's a tough call. And parenting is It's a full-time job,
Yeah.
like 24/7. So,
Um, Before we jump into the next part of the health and wellness thing, I want to get your take because we were actually able to experience the convention this time instead of getting used to it. Because I think there's a difference,
hmm,
and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think there's a difference of getting used to something new and then being able to experience the new thing. Um, in your opinion, because we actually got to experience certain things this year, um, what would you tell somebody as far as time management and planning? What would you tell them to plan to see and kind of maybe see if you can wait until the next time you go, like as not to miss anything? Because I know that there's so much that Dragon Con offers that you literally can't see everything in 5 days. So you have to, see certain things one year, certain things the next year, sort of thing.
yeah. God. So for my part, I love the panels. Like I love learning things. Um, so for efficiently scheduling that, if there is a particular theme, say that you really enjoy, the convention is usually pretty good at clustering panels together
Hmm.
in that regard. Like a lot of the science panels were in the Hilton.
Yeah,
A lot of the arts and costuming stuff I think was in the Marriott or shoot, I forget. But again,
yeah.
you can find out what hotels have what panels you're looking for, and then you can just kind of just linger in that hotel for a bit, and just hop rooms depending
And
on the panel.
one of the things I am going to bring up, just because it seemed to be something and not we, between us, but it seemed to be something that we struggled with, um, was DragonCon offers an app on your phone so that you can plan your day
Yeah,
or your entire experience. So, I mean, I know your phone had some issues cooperating with the app, but as far as using the app to schedule things, did you find that effective? Um, as to the extent that you could use it.
yeah. The app definitely came in handy.
Hmm.
For each time slot for the panel, essentially, I'd look through whatever was going on. I'd highlight the ones that I wanted to see, and then once I did all that, I'd go through the ones I highlighted and pick the one I really wanted to see.
Yeah,
Um,
because some of them would overlap as far as time, and the thing that I think we struggled with was the fact that we wanted to go to one panel that was in one hotel, and we literally would only have 20 minutes to a half an hour to get over to the other hotel in the midst of 90,000 people, and we actually missed a few things because of timing, and we missed a few things because they planned very poorly. That whole what was that event that we were supposed to go to that we were in line for, that they ended up having stairs going up to it? I forgot what that was.
yeah,
I think it was some sort of dance party that we were supposed to go to,
it was
and they had stairs going up to it, and nobody told us until we got up to it.
yeah, it was a Star Wars party. The last night on Alderaan,
Yeah,
and yeah, that was inconvenient.
disheartening. But as far as because I said this at the end of the convention, I do think that we still need to work on some time management, figuring out what we really want to see and what we have time to see based on travel between the hotels.
Hmm.
Um, so, you know, what things would you say were important to you as opposed to the things that were just a curiosity?
Boy.
Because some of the panels I ended up going with you to, I actually enjoyed. But the way that they were described, I never would have gone of my own choice. And that by that I mean I would have never gone without your recommendation because the way that they were described it wasn't really enticing.
And yeah, I have to admit, for the panel, they just have like a very small blurb describing
Yeah,
it. So maybe their word use wasn't quite the optimal selection,
yeah,
but yeah, they made do with what they had.
yeah.
And again, the app helped; it had the descriptions and everything. Um, but yeah, I you definitely have to prioritize. For my part, I had fun just looking at the costumes.
Yeah.
As an artist, like I make my own stuff, and just seeing what people make out of, foam and balsa wood, stuff like that. Just amazing props and accessories and overall costumes. Like if you go to the con for nothing else, the costumes it's like a museum. It's incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's both a curiosity and an interest of mine. Just the costumes. The panels, for my part, I think are an added bonus. I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
like an official academic lesson in what NASA found last year, and on the Hubble telescope, or something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's weird because a lot of the panels that you and I went to together, my initial reaction toward them was, how does this relate to being at a convention? Why is this sort of panel at a convention? But it, it was fascinating to me how they crafted their presentation to be relatable to the environment that we were in. Like they described it in a way that related to being at Comic Con.
yeah, like a lot of the scientific panels would
Yes.
liken it to science fiction, and kind of give, like, I don't know, a brief history or brief history uh, rundown of how something works in Star Trek or Doctor Who, or something like that.
Like
And
how
then they
like
go
how
into,
science fiction can be based in reality, like you and I were talking about a couple days ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so they definitely made it relatable, with the main focus on uh, actual, educating the people on, hey, what's happening in science news or environment, or that sort of thing. And then, of course, you also had a lot of arts panels, a lot of maker and electronics and
Hmm.
mechanical engineering, that sort of thing. So whatever your interest was, it probably was covered
Yeah.
uh, at some point in during that 5-day con. So have at it.
um, to transition into kind of the rest of you know the subjects we want to cover around health and wellness, um, your interpretation of why Concrud exists, and I'm curious to know because would you say that being in that environment, like being immersed in that environment, is an adrenaline rush?
Oh yeah.
And I'm wondering if that adrenaline rush keeps you healthy during the convention, but as you're coming down from that adrenaline rush, is that what potentially can cause con crud because your body's catching up to you and catching up to the things that you were exposed to?
Oh, yes and no, actually.
Because con crud really only exists, the phenomena of con crud only exists after a convention.
Yeah. Well, also it's epidemiology at work.
Yeah.
So I mean, one of the basic takeaways from what do you do on at DragonCon to protect yourself and that sort of thing. Like our first year, we went to a panel that said, get enough sleep, drink enough water, eat, and a bunch of other basic stuff that you forget to do because of the adrenaline rush. Like, oh, I gotta see this, I gotta see this. Oh my god, that's such a cool costume. Oh, let me take pictures. So you forget to sleep, drink, eat, and that stress kind of it breaks down your immune system.
I think that got the best of us the first year, but I think because of our boarding accommodations this year, I think we were, at least in that respect, I think we were a little bit healthier because we got sleep and we had the ability to, obtain food at a better, frequency than we did last year.
Yeah, I would agree. We actually did get enough sleep for the most part. We had enough to eat. I always, whenever I stopped by, whenever I walked past a water fountain, I'd at least get a sip of water,
Yeah.
and that helped keep us hydrated.
Yeah.
But yeah, for people who don't do that, they don't sleep very much. They drink alcohol. They either forget to eat or maybe just eat like one meal a day. Yeah, your immune system takes a hit. And with that many people, if just one person is sick and it's either airborne or they touch a railing that everyone else touches, they become vectors of the common cold or something,
Hmm.
and that's when it spreads. You know, pretty vehemently.
Yeah.
At least has that potential.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I think the trick is to take care of yourself, and again, wash your hands.
Yeah.
That's I think
And
uh
I think especially
takeaway.
being in I mean, the Comic-Con environment aside, I think being in the Atlanta environment, I think it's necessary to stay hydrated because,
Mm,
especially, and you can speak to whether it's just you walking up the hill or whether it was you helping me push up a hill. I think that the heat takes a toll on you, um, in the way of exhaustion. So I think that staying hydrated in that type of environment is extremely important.
mm, definitely. Luckily, you had 5 hotels to choose from, so each of them offered a great respite from the heat.
Yeah.
Good air conditioning, hydration, food. Yeah. So the trick is not to linger outside for too long, especially if you're in costume, because
Yeah.
that can take a toll.
Yeah. I mean, I had to question some of the costumes I saw that were, like you were talking about, very large, and I
Mm.
had to question whether they went outside at all, because you have to wonder, with all of the people walking around outside, because it was just as congested outside as far as foot traffic. um, so you have to wonder how long they're able to sustain themselves in that costume while they're outside, because there's no air conditioning outside. It's dead air.
My hypothesis is that they were residents of the hotel,
Yeah.
and they stayed there in their costume for the duration, and then whenever they were like, okay, I'm tired of this, then they went to the room, got out of costume, and then enjoyed the rest of the con. That's how I would have played it. But
Yeah.
uh, yeah. So
um, to jump into a little bit of, because as far as I know, based on our conversations after the convention, you didn't really have any issues with Con Crud, if I'm remembering correctly.
no, I felt a little weird. The last half of the penultimate day, like this, so the second to last day, I started feeling, a little bit of stinging in my nose, kind of, a sore throat. Um, on what was it? Monday. Um, I, yeah, I didn't feel bad or anything, but I'm like, ooh,
Well,
I
and I
should probably
and
be
I
careful.
think I think because we were more comfortable in our environment, we were more social. So I think, for me at least, I don't know if you did as much talking as I did, um, but I know for me, my throat hurt because I was talking so much. Like, I
Mm,
didn't necessarily get sick and feel that way, but because I was interacting and, being social, that's why my throat hurt. So I mean, was that the same for you, or was it actually more of a germ thing?
I don't know. It might have just been a lack of sleep or not enough water. But the day I got back to Ohio, I felt great. I'm like,
Really?
oh, okay, this isn't so bad. So, um, so yeah, I think I might have had the start of something, or it might have just been allergies or what have you. But yeah, it didn't last very long.
No.
So
Um, I wow, I'm starting to talk too much. My chest is getting weird. Um, One of the things that I experienced, not related, or I don't even know if it was related to the convention. Um, when I got home, I had told you, um, that I had gone to sleep on a Friday evening, and for whatever reason, um, I it was about 8:30 on a Friday evening. I ended up waking up, at 12:30, like literally exactly 4 hours later. And I'm like, you know what, it's probably normal because I usually get up and just use the bathroom and go back to bed. Um, but I noticed that, like, my body felt heavy, and that's, you know, other than the fact that I look like a giant potato. Um, but my body felt really heavy, and that wasn't really normal for me. Um, so I kind of did an assessment as to what things seemed off for me, and I noticed that I was having trouble breathing. I was in a cold sweat, and I had a migraine that could stop a bull.
oof.
Um, and with me, the whole one of the whole reasons I wanted to do the health and wellness segment was because me, and this is kind of a self responsibility for me. Um, I'm notorious for not paying attention to my health because I'm not the type to worry about it unless I'm on my deathbed. And I've been there a few times where I felt, like I need to go to the hospital. Um, but this particular time that, I woke up at 4 hours after I had gone to sleep, um, I went back to bed thinking nothing of it. I figured I'd just sleep it off. Well, 4:30 rolls around and I wake up again. And this time the headache's worse, the breathing is worse, and I now have, severe pain in my nerves and in my muscles. And the one thing that I'm sure I've talked to you about, and most of my close friends know, is that because of the spina bifida, I can't feel anything in my legs. Well, the one thing I never told my mom until after this whole episode had passed was that when I woke up at 4:30, I could feel the nerve endings in my legs. Like, and they felt like they were on fire. I've never in 34 years felt like that. Um, but I didn't want to wake anybody else up in my house to tell them about it because it was 4:30 in the freaking morning and I'm not doing that. So my stupid ass went back to bed. And I'm like, you know what? It's just gonna pass. It's just something that I've never had before, so it's just a fluke thing. I wake up at 8:30. So this was a literally 4-hour increments throughout the night. Um, I wake up at 8:30 in the morning, and at this point, like, I'm non-functional. Like, mom and I were supposed to go to what they call Old Salem days, which is like an art exhibit that happens in Salem each year, for one day only over a weekend. And we were supposed to go to Old Salem Days. And I actually looked at my mom and I'm like, I can't go. I don't feel good. And I explained to her what was going on. And I explained to her that I felt like I had a fever. She, gave me a thermometer. We checked it. I didn't have a fever, but there was such a level of fatigue in my body that I literally was incapable of doing anything without getting completely wore out. And we checked my blood pressure and my pulse, and the standard, at least the standard that I'm aware of, is 120 over 80 when you take your blood pressure. And the standard pulse rate is, I think, anywhere from 60 to 80. Mine was 111. Or no, first time was 120. Sorry. My pulse was 120. And so we decided not to go to Old Salem Days. So I crashed on the couch for most of the day. Thankfully, through the course of the day, everything started to dissipate and I felt better. My blood pressure was still kind of, back and forth for about 24 hours. And we never really figured out what the hell it was, because I had actually had a doctor's appointment that was already scheduled before all this happened, that I was going to. So I'm like, you know what, I'll just mention it to them. Because as you know, during the time that we were in Atlanta, I had my foot wrapped because of an abrasion that I had on my toe. So I had my foot wrapped and I was on antibiotics just to keep infection out of it. So they wanted me to follow up after we got home from Atlanta. So I had a doctor's appointment scheduled anyway. It just so happened that when I had that doctor's appointment, I ended up having to tell them about that. They took blood work, didn't really find anything out of the ordinary, so we still don't know what caused it. But stuff like that really makes me, at least now at 34, really pay attention to my health, because that could have easily been a mini stroke. It could have easily been a mini heart attack. We just don't know. The blood work shows everything's normal. My salt intake was a little high, but it was literally only one number over the highest end of the spectrum. So I didn't really pay much attention to that. But I don't know if it had anything to do with my body reacclimating to the environment here in Virginia as opposed to being in Atlanta, or what, because it didn't happen right away. It was progressive, and then all of a sudden it just hit me, like after we had already been home like a week and a half.
Yeah.
So that just freaked me out.
God, because that's pretty drastic for reacclimating.
Yeah.
My initial thought is that it's something else.
Yeah.
And it sounds like both you and your doctors are keeping tabs on it.
Well, I'm keeping tabs on it whenever I feel something. I don't keep tabs on something unless I actually feel something. Like I'm still not that actively aware of my health. I still don't pay attention to it as much as I should.
Because my philosophy is that you should invest in your body as if it's going to be a tool for you in the future.
Yeah.
And it is. So
Yeah.
that's my take. So treat it as best you can.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you can get a diagnosis on that to kind of steer you in the right direction, that'll help.
I mean, they always talk about the fear of the unknown, but I think with all of the medical treatment that I have needed over my life, I've just become so numb to things happening to me that I ignore them. because of the frequency of which I've had to be in medical facilities. So I think that's why I don't pay attention to it as much as I should. Um, but it's also the fact that we still don't know, based on the blood work, why any of that happened. So I mean, to a certain degree, it is fear of the unknown.
Mm.
Um, it's one of those things. Like, are you like how hyper aware are you of your own health? Like, do you notice like the least littlest things? I know, and if you don't mind me bringing it up, I know a couple days ago we talked about something randomly happening to your eye that you were very aware of. Um, but other than that, are you generally hyper aware of your health, or do you have to get to a certain degree of, oh shit, this is something serious, before you actually pay attention to it?
For my part, I'd say I'm mostly hyper aware, especially if it's superficial. Like if my eyelid's a little red for some reason, I'm like, whoa, that's weird. Um, but again, that's also something I just have to look in the mirror for.
Yeah.
For something that requires blood work, uh, I mean, for a number of years ago, I was deficient in like B12.
Hmm.
Um, so they had me, take some supplements, but yeah, but I guess when you lack certain nutrients, it can make you feel differently.
Yeah.
A lot of it are symptoms of depression, like that
Yeah.
that bad,
Yeah.
um, as well as what is like anemia or something,
Yeah.
where if you're kneeling down and you get up too quickly, you're like, oh, you're
Well, that could be anemia. May I've always like, they call that vertigo. But I think anemia can cause vertigo.
oof.
Because anemia, my understanding of anemia is it's um abnormally low blood pressure, and if you try to do something quickly, the anemia kicks in and causes the vertigo. And yeah, I see you opening up a window. Um,
Sorry.
no, and I'm glad you did, because you can clarify whether I'm right or wrong. Because it seems like anemia would cause vertigo, because anemia is there is a thing with your blood, and when you're trying to, say, get up really fast from a sitting position, you tend to have vertigo. So I wonder if the two, go hand in hand.
Yeah, just anemia is a condition in which you lack enough healthy red blood cells to carry adequate oxygen to your body's tissues. Um, so yeah, having anemia can make you feel tired and weak. Uh, okay, yeah, and then it can just range from mild or severe symptoms. Um, but yeah,
And like the lack of oxygen to your blood would indicate to me that's what causes vertigo. Because if the oxygen isn't in your blood, you're going to feel that sensation when you're trying to do something, you know, at your normal pace, but your body's not wanting to do it at the normal pace. So I
uh,
would think that anemia would be a precursor to vertigo. Or at least that's my understanding.
Possibly. And I know vertigo has kind of this amalgam of various causes and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And the symptoms might be different for people, but yeah, it's you don't know what's wrong until it has already happened
Yeah.
in the body,
Hmm.
which sucks. So there may not be warning signs until you're like, oh wow, I guess I already have this issue. So let's go to the
Yeah.
doctor and fix it. But but yeah, it's annoying.
Yeah.
The body is part of an ecosystem, part of nature, and a lot of stuff can just go wrong with it. And every other germ is just looking for, their food and stuff. So
Yeah. To shift to another part of the whole health and wellness discussion, I know you had this tab open. One of the things that we had discussed was the a story that I came across um, about Olivia Jackson, the stunt woman,
yeah.
and staying within the realm of kind of the nerd world and Comic Con, because I'm guessing, I mean, actors from, because she was a stunt woman on Resident Evil, and when you talk about movie actors, they tend to appear at Comic Cons. But the thing that there's a lot that we as entertainment consumers don't hear about, behind the scenes. And I think this story, if you want to give it a rundown, um, this story is a perfect example of the the kind of manipulation that happens behind the scenes to these people that are, putting their life on the line essentially, um, for the sake of entertainment. So I'll let you go through the article and kind of give your take on it, and I'll, give my response, and we can kind of discuss that.
Ooh, all right. Got to make it quick. All right. So, this is the week of September 12th, 2019. Resident Evil stunt double says, set crash severed her arm. Lawsuit. So yeah, a Hollywood stunt double filed a lawsuit this week against the producers of one of the films in the Resident Evil franchise after losing her arm in a catastrophic stunt gone wrong. Olivia Jackson, a stunt double for Resident Evil: The Last Chapter star, Mila
Mila
Jovovich.
Jovovich.
Whew, thank you. Said
That's only because I have a gigantic crush on that woman. Oh my god, like she's been a crush of mine since I was a kid.
But yeah, so she said she suffered severe injuries in an onset motorcycle crash back in 2015, causing her to have her arm amputated after being placed in a medically induced coma, according to the suit. The suit, which names producer Jeremy Bolton and producer director Paul Anderson, Jovovich, Jovovich's husband,
No, it's Mila Jovovich.
Jovovich, thank you. Jovovich's husband, as defendants, said the crash was the result of the production team elevating financial considerations over safety, the lawsuit said. Jackson, also a former model, claims the producers abandoned her and took out an insurance policy that only covered $33,000 of her medical expenses. And again, $33,000. Said that quickly. After the accident, she said she was paid $990 in lost earnings, despite the film's blockbuster success and gross of more than $300 million. And yeah, the article continues, but that's pretty much the gist of it. So yeah,
As I want to get two perspectives from you. As a consumer of all things entertainment, what are your thoughts as far as learning about something that the public probably wouldn't hear about because it's something that, it's one of the goings on behind the scenes. And from the perspective of the fact that you and I are currently in the process of writing a movie script, what considerations would you stipulate for the people, that are involved in recruiting actors and actresses for a project that we're going to be doing?
yeah. I mean, for our part, if you're working on a project,
Well, as far as I want to know your perspective as far as being in consumer of entertainment first,
yeah,
not really knowing, and because we would have never known about this had she not filed a lawsuit. So I'm curious what your thoughts are as far as, um, not really understanding fully what happens behind the scenes.
well, for my part, Uh, if you're part of a project that makes you part of a team, um, and in my mind, you should be able to take care of your own. So if you are part of a project that's grossing $300 million, you should be able to take care of your actors, actresses, writers, directors, stunt doubles, um, graphics artists, whatever member is on that team. You should cover them to protect them, especially stunt doubles, because they do some very dangerous shit.
Yeah.
And I, as a responsible, citizen, I don't think OSHA goes off the table when it comes to movies. So you need to make sure you set your stunts to be safe.
Yeah.
And this did not seem like it was happening. Later in the article, it goes on to reveal that Jackson said she was initially slated to film a fight scene on the day of the crash, but in a last-minute change, she was asked to perform a dangerous and technically complex motorcycle scene in adverse weather. And yeah, again, according to the lawsuit, the scene involved a vehicle fitted with a mechanical crane attached to a camera driving toward Jackson as she sped. Yeah, as she sped on her motorcycle directly at the camera. The camera was supposed to elevate safely above Jackson's head before she reached it, but the haphazardly planned stunt went terribly wrong. And that's when she lost her arm. So uh, it seems like there was some lack of oversight in this regard. And I think the producers, uh, they need to take responsibility for that. I I don't see how you could leave someone behind, especially if they're doing such dangerous work.
Yeah.
Uh, it I don't know. For me, it just boggles the mind. Like,
Yeah.
how would you not cover this?
Yeah.
So,
Um, but okay, so secondly, as far as your perspective, as somebody who is creating a movie script that will, inevitably, hopefully become a movie, you know, do do you think that we have grounds to stipulate certain things so that people that are recruited for our project are, safe? Because are we just the writers of the script, or does the production team and the directors and the producers are they the ones that have the responsibility of making sure all of that happens? Because I'm wondering if because I know some people sell their scripts to people who can produce and direct and all that stuff, but if we're responsible for casting, you know, in your mind, what would you stipulate, so that anything that we were to do that was any required any sort of physicality, um, beyond normal function, what would you stipulate so that we could make sure that our actors and actresses were, safe?
I mean, luckily for our part, I don't. We aren't writing an action movie, which helps. Uh,
Well, I mean, we haven't really gotten into. There probably could be action because it is a movie with conflict in it, so there could potentially be action in it at some point.
yeah, but I don't think we're going to incorporate motorcycle chases or.
No, but
Uh,
I mean, I do think that because of the nature of the movie, I do think that, there will be some physical conflict between opposing parties.
and it's very feasible. If that's the case, then I think we'd have to choreograph things so that they aren't dangerous.
Yeah,
Um, I know it's tough when you want to do like a high budget uh, action movie, and you want everything to look real, look as dangerous as possible while also being safe.
yeah,
Uh, I'd like to think Hollywood has the budget to do stuff like that, and this shouldn't be an issue. At least the article that we read. That's just uh, I don't know, flagrant injustice. The studios aren't taking responsibility, and they should.
mhm,
For small budget stuff like hours and independent film and that sort of thing, you kind of have to make do with what you have.
Yeah.
If you want to, I would say if you want to do like action-packed stuff, you might have to, lower your standards to a comedy and just do like toy motorcycles and claymation and that sort of thing.
I don't have the patience for, what is it called? Stop, or what is it called?
Stop motion.
Stop motion. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have the patience for that shit.
So, I mean, as small creators, I don't think we'd put anyone's life or well-being in danger.
Right.
But yeah, but also you can also make great movies that don't require action scenes. Like some of the greatest movies in history were very, I don't know, cerebral, or they didn't have a whole lot of action. It was just substance,
Yeah.
and actually that's a lot of what Hollywood's lacking now. So maybe that'd be a whole new revolution in filming. Actually, good writing.
Are you familiar? I'm guessing you're probably familiar. Are you familiar with the two Kill Bill films?
Yeah.
Do you who was it? Is it Uma Thurman that was in those? I think.
Yep.
Have you ever heard of the controversy between her and, I believe it was Quentin Tarantino, because I think he directed those.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of the controversy between them?
No. What's going on?
I don't know if it was the first or second movie. Might have been the first. Apparently, there was supposed to be a scene where she was in a moving car, and I don't know. I don't remember the specific thing, but she was in a moving car and it malfunctioned, and I believe injured her, or almost injured her, and she knew that there was something wrong with the car before she got in it, and she tried to tell Tarantino, but he goes, don't worry about it. I want it to be as real as possible, this, that, and the other. And he said, just do it. And by the end of the scene, she was terrified. So it actually strained their relationship for several years.
Interesting. Let's see.
Are you looking it up?
Yeah, there is an article. Let's see, 2018, in the Hollywood Reporter. Uma Thurman's Kill Bill crash sparks outrage in stunt community.
That would probably be the same scenario, yeah.
Yeah, let's see. So, okay, so it opens up with a question. How did actress Uma Thurman end up crashing into a tree at perhaps 40 miles an hour for the
That's
sake
right.
of...
She did crash into a tree. I forgot about that.
Okay, yeah, for the sake of a Quentin Tarantino movie. Stunt professionals are starting to ask tough questions in the wake of the New York Times article in which Uma Thurman reveals chilling footage of her violent crash while filming an iconic sequence in Mexico for 2004's Kill Bill Volume 2, and Thurman's guild isn't happy either. Let's see. And here's a quote. The situation, as it has been described, sounds like a stunt and would be likely a likely safety violation, says a spokesperson for Performers Union SAG and AFTRA, of which Thurman is a member. In general, only stunt professionals should perform stunts with guidance from a stunt coordinator to ensure a correct and safe performance. Huh. Interesting.
I'm surprised that you didn't know anything about that. But again, it speaks to what I was talking about before, as far as, things that happen behind the scenes that the entertainment consumer, people who consume entertainment don't necessarily know about. It goes to show that there is a lot that goes into things that a lot of people aren't made aware of.
Yeah. And I hate to say it, I alluded to this at one of our discussions a couple days ago, that the movie that we see on screen is just like the tip of the iceberg. Like all the work, all the effort and money and everything that goes into that film is like the bottom 90% of that iceberg, and we don't see that.
Yeah.
In the credits, we see, written by, directed by, that sort of thing, which helps. But you have this long list of credits that we may or may not stay to see at the end of the movie. So there's a lot of work that goes involved in a lot of these artistic endeavors, that needs to be appreciated.
Yeah.
And I don't think we as a society do, because we pay movie stars millions of dollars, but the writers, the stunt doubles, the uh, whoever else, they get paid, I don't know, maybe 80,000 a year, 100,000, whatever. Still a good living, but not nearly as much as Hollywood movie stars do.
Yeah.
Ugh.
It's crazy. You know, there are people that I think about what I said earlier about me not really being that hyper aware of my health unless it's of dire consequence. Um, and then, there are people like you who are probably far more aware of your health, when something goes wrong because you're used to things being a certain way and you notice when things are off. Um, but then you have, the people in the entertainment world who I believe have to be hyper aware of their health because their health, is part of their job in a sense. Like
Hmm.
if they're in poor health, they're not making money because they're out of work for whatever health reason. And one of the things that you and I didn't talk about because it came up after we discussed this, or this being the topic, um, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the new version of Queer Eye that's on Netflix.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard good things.
One of the guys on there, his name's Jonathan Van Ness. Absolutely amazing person. Um, I've watched all 4 seasons that they have of the show, and they're all very upbeat and very personable and very warm and welcoming. But I think this also goes to show the one thing that you and I grew up with, um, was that when we were growing up, celebrities to a certain extent still had a personal life. Like they were able to keep things out of the media. But now that a 24-hour news cycle and social media exist, um, I think it's a lot harder. And even though this was on his own terms, Jonathan Van Ness actually just wrote and released a book where he talks about, 'cause he's 32 now, and he said that 5 years ago, because he was a hairstylist before he started on Queer Eye, and he said that in the process of doing somebody's hair at a salon that he was working at, he said that he started to feel ill, and all of a sudden passed out. And the next thing he remembers, he was waking up on the floor looking at people that were standing around him, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. So um, he, I guess, took the rest of the day off, went to the doctor the next day, and found out that he had HIV.
Ugh.
He was completely unaware of it. And this was 5 years ago. And he's just now talking about it. But he said that he's been able to, you know, overcome it because of the medication that exists. And he's on medication right now that um, makes it undetectable in any tests. Like their levels are so low that it's undetectable and untransmittable uh,
Good.
with the medication that he's on. Um, so while there's no cure for it yet, I think that they are with the existence of something like that, they should be very close to one, because it seems like it would just be the next step above whatever he's on would cure
Mm.
it. It would just have to be a more permanent solution. But again, it goes to, what we don't hear about until somebody brings it to our attention. And I think that in a constant news cycle and, constantly connected world, I think that I actually am. This is going to sound horrible, but I think you're going to understand what I mean. I envy the fact that he was able to keep that part of his life private until he was ready to talk about it, because anybody could have obtained that information and leaked it.
Mm.
But it still shows that there is an element of privacy in a constantly connected world.
Yeah, the fact that I mean, what comes to mind is like TMZ,
Hmm.
something like that, where essentially you have paparazzi, uh, solely for the sake of finding drama and conflict, and you're like,
Hmm.
"Hey, let's sell this and, you know, show it to everyone on TV, and here we go, now we have a show," and, uh, it's
And the one and it shocked me because if when TLC released their song Waterfalls back in '95, that actually the music video actually spoke about the AIDS epidemic in the '90s. I as a kid in the '90s, I obviously never knew what AIDS was or HIV. Um, and I didn't know what it was until I started actually going to camp. There were kids that I was in at camp with that had HIV. And I think because I was in that environment, it conditioned me not to be afraid of it.
mm,
Because if you think about um, like the Matthew Shepard case, the and the two that come to mind are Matthew Shepard and Ryan White. Matthew Shepard was a boy that was in Laramie, Wyoming, and he classmates of his found out that he had HIV and brought him out to the country and tied him to a fence and beat the living piss out of him, and he
mm.
died while being tied to that fence. Um, I don't I don't remember a lot about the Ryan White case, but I think that it was another case of he was asked to leave the school that he was in because of they had found out that he had HIV, and that it was still so uncommon for the public to know about it that people weren't educated enough to realize that he could have stayed in school, um, but people were just afraid of it. And I think, although I say natural causes, there like no person caused his death. Um, he, I believe, died young, but died of the disease instead of being, killed like Matthew Shepard was.
Uh, yeah. So I just looked up Ryan White. So apparently he was an adolescent hemophiliac, uh, who contracted AIDS via blood transfusion.
Oh,
Uh,
okay, yeah,
so and and again, it was the '80s. No one knew what the hell this was.
yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of fear mongering.
So was Ryan's, or if you look up Matthew Shepard, if was Ryan's case before Matthew?
Yeah, Ryan. This was it's 1984 with the
Okay,
transfusion. Let's see, diagnosed at 13. This is in Kokomo, Indiana.
yep.
Hmm.
And I think the Matthew Shepard thing was late '80s, early '90s.
Yeah, so Ryan White died on in April 1990 1 month before his high school graduation and only months before Congress passed legislation bearing his name in August 1990, the Ryan White Comprehensive AIDS Resource Emergency
Hmm.
Act. Let's see. Yeah, so that was in 1990 at the very latest. So you kind of through the 80s. Whereas Matthew Shepard. Okay, yeah. So this was in '98. So Matthew Shepard
Oh,
was
okay.
a gay American student at the University of Wyoming who was beaten, tortured, and left to die near Laramie on the night of October 6, 1998. He was taken by rescuers to Poudre Valley Hospital in Fort Collins, Colorado, where he died 6 days later of severe head injuries.
Yeah, I remember watching um, the trial of the two boys that were responsible. Um, and I was even still young then when the boys went on trial. But I mean, you just, on the one hand, you never know what's going on with somebody, but on the other hand, it's not, they're not obligated to tell you either. Um, so I think that you need to be compassionate, but you also need to be willing to understand if you need to be compassionate if you don't know somebody's situation, but I think that you also need to be compassionate and understanding if they are willing to open up to you,
Yeah.
because I think that it can do more to your mental and emotional health if you open up to somebody and say, "Hey, I have this, condition," and they completely shut you out for the fact that they just are uneducated.
Yeah, and actually that's the crux of it, education. I mean, I can understand the panic and just I don't know. The 80s were a weird time, and no one knew what this virus was.
Hmm.
Um, so in Ryan White's case, like there was a lot of fear mongering and oh stay away from me and that sort of thing. But as we learn more about HIV, AIDS, there's less to fear, um, especially day to day stuff.
Yeah,
And I know hospitals now are taking precautions for blood transfusions and making sure everything is safe. Granted, it's not 100% all the time, so you always have to take precaution. But now that we know what it is, how it's transferred, and that sort of thing, um, there's a whole lot less reason to be afraid, and we can afford ourselves, uh, to show compassion and that sort of thing without having to worry about someone coughed on me now I have to go to the hospital. Like no, you don't have to worry about that.
yeah.
Um, I'm sorry to say, in Matthew Shepard's case, I think that was just a matter of homophobia. Um,
I think it absolutely was, but because I do think that the boys knew that he was gay, and they just accused him of hitting on them or whatever.
hmm.
Um, Not to get too deep into something that I know will get us into another conversation because I want to end fairly quickly,
Oh, okay.
but um, as far as being cognizant and hyper aware of your health within the resources that are readily available to you, what is your message to people of being you know aware of their health and dealing with their health, um, outside of the larger discussion of healthcare as a whole, but with what people can do in an everyday situation? What is your kind of message to them to do like everyday maintenance as far as things that don't require healthcare or medical insurance?
Yeah, I mean, not to get too into social commentary, but this is America, so stay in your homes. Uh, but
I mean, as far as self accountability, what would you say you can do on your own without having to rely on somebody else or rely on the system to maintain your health, so that maybe when you have to seek medical attention, it's not something that's going to be as serious.
yeah, the I think at the very least, no matter what you can do, is control your diet. Um, I know you hear, the myth that fruits and vegetables and whole grains are a whole lot more expensive than macaroni and cheese and hamburger helper and that
That's
thing.
not a myth. That's the truth.
Well, ounce for ounce, when you look at the nutrient density of green peppers,
Yeah,
say, versus the nutrient density of hamburger helper, um, it's better to pay $1 per pound for.
if you have the money to do so.
Yeah, but then don't waste your money on foods that are heavily salted and fatty and
Yeah,
sugary, because
yeah,
that's throwing your money down the drain
yeah.
for quick satiety. Um, so
I think the problem is with the processed foods like you're talking about. They're they provide more of an ability to ration them out into servings, whereas if you get a couple of fruits or a couple of vegetables, that's technically only like one or two servings. So I think the processed foods provide more servings so that you can eat more food and you know have a cessation of hunger quicker than if you were to have to buy 4 or 5 apples to you know
yeah, and
combat hunger.
a lot of it depends on the resources available too.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say it, there's no nutrients in macaroni and cheese or hamburger helper,
Are
but
you
two,
serious?
but but again, you're paying $2 for a box, and that box is what, like 7 ounces, maybe. Uh,
Something like that, yeah.
and whereas you pay, $4 for 3 pounds of apples, say, um, that's actually a better nutrient cost breakdown than the macaroni and cheese. Uh, but what you can do is, if you have macaroni and cheese, spice it up a bit.
Yeah,
If you can only afford one pepper, that pepper can go further if you chop it up, put it in your macaroni and cheese, and then you have a little bit more mass to that food, and you can
yeah,
make 2 meals of that.
yep,
Um, and you can do the same with like box spaghetti. If you can
yep.
get box spaghetti, again, depending on where you live, maybe like $1 a box or so. And sometimes, and I'm in Ohio, so the cost of living is a little bit cheaper for me, thankfully.
Yeah,
But back in Vermont, where I used to live, you really had to budget more than I do now.
yeah,
And it's so my dollar goes further here than it did in Vermont. But honestly, I used to shop at like the old, dented can stores,
yeah.
uh, where you could get food for a little cheaper, especially around a budget.
Now,
Uh,
I know we've talked briefly about this before, but I don't remember if Vermont was included. Is Vermont considered a state or a commonwealth? Because I know Virginia is a commonwealth for me.
yeah, it's a state. Um, but yeah, so you definitely have to budget for it, but you get more out of what you buy when you
Yeah,
stick with fruits, vegetables, whole grains. Um, and if you keep the junk food to a minimum, at the very least, you're off to a good start to a more healthy lifestyle.
yeah,
On top of that, if you can stay away from drinking too much, smoking too much, etc., that would help.
yeah,
And then exercise, of course, and then a couple other things, and then get a physical annually at the very least.
yeah,
But again, that's for people with insurance and that sort of thing, and that becomes problematic as well. So
yeah. But I think it's just I think people need to be more. I think people need to be more self starters. Like they need to be, willing to take that action, that initial action, to essentially for preventative maintenance as far
Yeah,
as their health. Because
you have to be your own advocate.
I think if you can do preventative maintenance that is on the cheaper side, you don't have to you don't have to deal as much with um, healthcare, health insurance, the medical world. But I think that a stronger self awareness and a stronger self responsibility is necessary.
Uh,
I think that's something that humans in general could work on.
and the start of that self-awareness and you know self-starting is educating yourself.
Yeah,
We have to educate ourselves on what foods actually are nutritious and what the hell are calories and what are carbs and that sort of thing, because technically fruits and vegetables are carbohydrates, but
yeah.
also so is craft dinner.
Yeah.
So uh
But all right. I think that's a good place to end.
okay,
I hope that people, who watch this back, get some good information out of it. Um, but yeah, I'm glad to kind of get back into the swing of things and um, back into a routine of doing this. Just because I think it helps develop a routine, and I think routines are also
Mhm.
healthy for the most part. I know there's bad routines, but I think any routine you develop is generally a good thing. But yeah, I think we'll end here, and we will be back with you next week. We will let you know on my Twitter and some of my social media what the next topic is, and we hope people will join us then. So we will see everybody next week.
Cool.
Bye.
See ya. Whew.